Hi, it's Matthew Graves from Quick Start Coach with your Monday Mindset session. On Mondays, I teach about how to master yourself. Mastering yourself is the core that makes all success possible. Unless you can deploy control over your time and actions, then you will never uncover your true potential. Deep beneath the surface that we control is a powerful force that's part conscious and part unconscious. What I'm talking about are habits. According to the Cambridge English Dictionary, a habit is something that you do often and regularly, sometimes without knowing that you're doing it. We run much of our life on habits, but they can work to our advantage or against us. So what we're going to talk about tonight is how to turn them in your favor. Much of what we're going to talk about tonight is based on the work by Charles Duhigg and James Clear. Their books, The Power of Habit and Atomic Habits, are both highly recommended. The habits that help us, we generally refer to as good habits, and those which hinder us as bad habits. Each has an enormous power over our daily lives and, more importantly, our long-term future. The reason that this is because small changes or factors like habits have a compounding effect over time. The idea of getting 1% better every day is like earning money in a bank account. The interest keeps compounding, creating an exponential effect. As James Clear says in his book, Atomic Habits, if you want to predict where you'll end up in life, all you have to do is follow the curve of tiny gains or tiny losses and see how your daily choices will compound 10 or 20 years down the line. Or, in fewer words, habits are the compound interest of self-improvement. You can see the effect of making a small change, like getting 1% better every day, in the following graph. In this graph, you can see that if you get 1% better every day for a year, you'll be 37 times better by the end of the year. If you earned 1% daily interest on a $1 investment, at the end of the year, you'd have $37.78. That is a very sharp upward curve, as you can see with the arrow pointing up. And as you can see, it has a compounding effect. It's not a straight line. It's a curve where the curve keeps getting steeper and steeper the longer time goes by. The improvement of continuing with good habits or good investments keeps adding up more and more and more every time period that goes by. However, if you get 1% worse each day per year, then you will have lost 97% of the original investment. So if you lost 1% of your $1 investment each day, then at the end of the year, you'd only have 3 cents left. So as you can see, the curve for the decline, the 1% decline, is steep at the beginning and gets shallower over time. It's the opposite of the curve of the 1% better. And if you look at these curves and you think about how this relates to things that you want to change and to the habits and how they have an effect on your life, it's the same way. So think about the improvement curve and think about, for instance, building your online business. If these two lines were time and results, it works out the same way. You go a long period of time where it seems like you're not getting a lot of results. But if you keep consistently doing your actions over time, then once you have built up enough compound interest effect, then the results start to move sharply upwards. And vice versa, the same thing when you think about bad habits. So if you decide that you're going to give up on your habit of, let's say, working out or let's say walking at least a mile every day, then it's going to have a big effect in the short term. And then as time goes along, you're going to settle out in a much worse situation than you were. So that's the real power that is behind your good habits versus your bad habits, is the fact that it's not a straight line, it compounds. So your good habits are those that move you towards your goals, and your bad habits are those that take away from your success and your goals. And the problem with habits is that the actual effect of a single instance of a habit is small, but the long term effect is huge, just like we just saw on the graph. You know, choosing to save a little money every day is not something that is a large sacrifice the day that you make it, but what it's going to pay off in the future is going to be very large. So that long term effect is huge. It's easy to skip a workout for one day. And I mean, you look at it and you say, what difference is one day going to make? However, skipping one workout and then another workout stops the compounding effect. So the effect in the future is very, very large. So think of it like investing in your retirement. When you're 40 years away from retirement, it doesn't seem like waiting a couple of years to start saving is really going to make a big difference. However, what you don't factor in is that the first years of savings are the ones that have the longest time to compound. So at the other end of that 40 years, not saving in year 1 and 2 has a massive effect because it was starting early and doing it consistently that was going to have the biggest effect. So that's why it's so critical to minimize your bad habits and build more good habits right away. Straightening out your processes now will pay off big in the long term. And that's what habits are and how we should see them. They're the elements of a system of how we live our lives. Or, as James Clear says in his book, Atomic Habits, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. So when you think about it, most of us go through our day in a routine, in a system. You wake up, usually at the same time, you do the same things in the same order, and that is how we run through our day. And then at night, we go to sleep and we go through the exact same routine, before we lie our heads down and go to sleep. All of those little steps that you take in the run of the day, your routine, are your habits. It's a system that you're following. It's almost like it's a checklist, and you have a checklist of things, and you do it most days in the order that you always do it in, with a few variations from one day to the next. But you get up, and if the first thing you do when you get up is brush your teeth, then that's what you do every day. You get up and you go brush your teeth. We don't usually mix it up that much because we've got this system that we're following. How many of those steps in that system are good, and how many of those steps in that system are detracting from what you do will ultimately determine your end result. So what we want to know is we want to know, how can we create a system where we have more good and better habits and less bad habits? So we're going to talk about the 4 steps to building better habits, and all of the things and actions and tactics that you can do to try to have more good habits and less bad habits fall under these 4 things. So we're going to talk about first the 4 steps to building better habits, and then we're going to talk about the 4 ways to decrease your bad habits. So the first of the 4 steps to building better habits is make the better habits obvious. If you want to focus on doing the right thing in your setting, every day as you're going through. You want to make it so that it's automatic and so that there are all kinds of cues around you which are telling you to do the right thing. If you wake up and you go out to the kitchen, and on the kitchen counter are freshly baked muffins that are full of saturated fat, you're going to want to eat those muffins. If you, however, you get up and you go out to the kitchen and what you see on the kitchen counter is a bowl of fresh fruit, then you're making it obvious that you should be eating the fruit and not the muffins. So you want to make it obvious that you should do these things. And there's a few things you can do about that. Now, the first thing that you need to do in the goal of making it obvious is you have to know what your habits already are. You can't fix what you don't understand. And most of us go through this system every day so much on automatic that we're not even aware of the things that we're doing. So you want to first become aware of your habits, both the conscious ones from point of view of the systems that you follow in that checklist that we discussed, but also the unconscious ones of how you react to particular stimulus. And when something happens or you see a cue, when you see that muffin, that immediately triggers you to want to eat it. So that's a habit that you have. So you want to, first of all, start tracking your habits so you can get an idea. So we talked about this in past sessions, like the idea of tracking your time and how much time you're spending doing different things. It's the same thing. Most of us operate on such an unconscious basis that we're not even aware of how much time we waste or how many bad habits we have that we use over the run of a day that is diminishing our ability to have success. So take a little time. It's not something you have to do every day for the rest of your life, but take a day or two and literally write down everything that comes up over the run of the day, all the habits that you go through, and then think, and so that you're aware of them. Then go back through that and say, which of these habits are helping me moving forward and I want to encourage more of? And then which of these habits are actually diminishing and holding me back from where I want to be? So that these are the things I need to work on getting rid of. These are the things I want to build more of. And then, are there any habits that you'd like to have that you're not doing right now? So let's say you don't exercise, but you really want to. Well, add that to the list of the good habits that you want to build on. And then have that list in mind when you're going through all the rest of the parts of this training so that you're aware of how can I make the habits I want to build more obvious, for example. So the first thing is to know what your habits are. Then there's a few things you can do to help make your habits more obvious. And some of these I've discussed in the past because a lot of these things fall under multiple categories. So one way that I really like to make habits more obvious is a process called habit stacking. And what that is setting a rule that whenever you do something that you already have as a habit, you will then immediately do some new habit right after it. So you stack the habits on top of each other. So if every morning you get up and you brush your teeth, and then you go out to the kitchen and you make a coffee, let's say, and you follow that routine every day. That's the habit you already have. And you want to insert a new habit into that. So you want to insert a new habit that you would like to, let's say, meditate for 2 minutes every day. So what you do is you say, every day after I make my coffee, I'm going to meditate for 2 minutes. So you stack the new habit that you want to build on top of the existing habit that is already ingrained in your brain of making coffee. So you just set this rule and you say, after I do this, then I will do that. And when you do that, you're really tying together what's already built in to your system, the habit you already have, with something new you want to adopt. And of course, habits are built through repetition. So as you do this for a while, what will happen is you will immediately, that new thing that you want to be your habit, the new positive habit you want to develop, will become automatic, just like the rest of the habits. So I did this because I was trying to switch around my diet. And I decided, I want to remember that I want to have 30 grams of protein first thing in the morning within a half hour of waking up. That was the habit that I wanted to develop. This habit of having 30 grams of protein in the first 30 minutes. And the best way for me to do that, I tried a variety of different ways. Ate a lot of eggs, let's just say that. But I determined the best way for me to do that was with a protein shake. And so I bought protein shakes and I put them in the fridge. But how can I always remember to make sure that I do it in the first 30 minutes every morning? And that was by stacking my habits. So what I did was, one of my habits that I just mentioned that I have is, the first thing that I do every morning is I get up and I go out to the kitchen and I make coffee. So the first thing generally I like to do in the run of a day is have my coffee. So I stacked them. Now I kind of reverse stacked them, but I said, when I go out and make my coffee, I'm going to drink my protein shake. So I kind of inserted it between the habit of making the coffee and drinking the coffee. So I can't drink my coffee until I've drunk the protein shake. And I get the protein shake out as I'm making the coffee. So I stacked my making coffee habit, which I never miss any day. I wouldn't want to even think about what would happen if I missed that. But I never don't make my coffee in the first 30 minutes of every day. So if I know I'm doing that in the first 30 minutes and I want to add something else to the first 30 minutes, stack it on top of making coffee. It's like I stacked another habit. I wanted to make sure that I always wrote down my 3 wins and my 3 tasks at the end of the day. So obviously, one thing before I go to sleep is I climb into bed. I can't go to sleep, unless I fall asleep at my desk. I can't go to sleep without climbing into bed. So climbing into bed is the habit that starts the routine of sleep. So I just set a rule and said, as soon as I climb into bed, the first thing I'm going to do before I do anything else is do my 3 tasks, my 3 wins. So I always do it. I don't always remember to put it on Facebook, but I always go through and write the notes for myself, so that I write down what were my 3 wins for the day and what are my 3 tasks for tomorrow as soon as I get into bed. So I get into bed, write those things down, then the rest of the day can happen. But I stacked it on top of things I already did. So whenever you want to insert a new habit that you want to develop, stack it on top of an existing one. The other thing you can do is what's called an implementation intention. So you're going to be much more likely to do something if you actually assign a date, time, and location to it. So instead of saying, well, I hope I get on the treadmill, or I hope I go for a walk, 3 days a week, what you do is you say, Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays, I am going to go for a walk at 12 noon at the local park. And you set it up that way. So when you say, I'm going to actually do some task at a particular time and at a particular place, what you do is, that's called setting an implementation intention. So when do you intend to actually implement this task that you're trying to do? So when you give it that kind of definitive purpose and time, you're going to be much more likely to do it. It's like the thing that I always recommend to people about time blocking and scheduling your time the night before for the next day. When you say, I am going to work on this task that I don't want to do tomorrow morning at from 9 to 10 o'clock, and you put it into Google Calendar, and Google Calendar is going to pop up, you're going to be much more likely to do it than if you just say, I'm going to do this tomorrow. The more specific you make the time and the location as to when you're going to implement a task or do a habit, the more likely it's going to happen. So set implementation intentions for the things you want to add. Then the other thing, and this is, in my opinion, in all these areas, vastly underestimated, and that is you want to design your environment to make the cues of good habits obvious and visible. So you want to set things up in your surroundings that is going to constantly remind you of the things that you're trying to do more of. So as I mentioned, if you want to eat more fruit or eat healthier, don't put the fruit in the fridge, put it out on the counter where you can see it. You're going to be much more likely to pick it up and eat it if it's sitting out on the counter, because every time you see it, it's going to remind you, oh, I'm supposed to be eating more fruit. You have to set up your environment to make it obvious, to constantly be reminding you of the things that you want to be doing more of. Right here in my office next to me, as I stand here and motion to it, which you can't see, is my treadmill. And then right behind me in my office is my set of weights. I can't come into my office, where obviously I spend a lot of time, without the reminder being obvious that I'm supposed to be picking up those weights and doing something with them, and that I'm supposed to be getting on that treadmill and walking. Because it's right here, it's in front of me. I've made it obvious. So design your environment. So if you do those things, if you're aware of your habits, and then you use habit stacking and implementation intentions, and you set up things in your environment to constantly remind you of the good things that you're supposed to be doing, then it makes adopting these new habits much, much easier. Now, the second thing that you want to do in order to build more good habits is make it attractive. So you've made it obvious, it's there, but what can you do to actually make it you want to do that good habit more often? Because the more attractive an opportunity is, the more likely it's going to actually become a habit. Ultimately, as humans, we are completely motivated by those chemicals, the dopamine, etc., that runs through our bodies and our brains. So that's why sometimes bad habits are so hard to break, and why sometimes it's hard to establish good habits. Because as I said earlier, good habits pay off in the long run. Not eating that chocolate bar right now is something that will pay off 10 years from now. However, eating it right now is going to give your brain a surge of all the chemicals it wants. So it's very attractive to want to eat that chocolate bar or that muffin. And the benefit that you're looking at is a way out in the future. And we're very short-term focused. So what you want to do is you want to change things around so that you give more short-term benefits for adopting these new habits that are going to pay off in the long term. So you can do that through a variety of different ways. One way is called temptation bundling. So temptation bundling is one way to make your habits more attractive. The strategy of temptation bundling is to pair something you want to do with something that you need to do. So let's go back to my habit stacking example from the last item we were discussing. I really want to drink my coffee in the morning, but I can't drink my coffee until I've already drunk my protein shake. So I've got to do my protein shake before I can drink my coffee. So I've bundled it together. I've bundled what I want to do, which is drink my coffee, with what I need to do, which is take in more protein. So by bundling them in that way, what I'm doing is I'm essentially giving myself a reward for doing what it was I was supposed to do. So think about all the things that you really like to do and try to bundle or pair them with the things that you need to do. We talked about this in last week's session in procrastination, where I said, take those things that you enjoy doing, let's say watching your favorite TV show, and set a rule and say, I'm only going to watch my favorite TV show after I've done something else that I didn't want to do. So there's something else that I know I need to do, but I'm not allowed to watch my favorite TV show until I've already done this other task. Or I can only watch my TV show while I'm doing some other task that is something that I want to do more regularly, consistently, and build into a habit. You bundle your temptations so that you trick yourself into wanting to do the things that you need to do because they are the gateway to what you want to do. The other thing, which is very important in making these good habits more attractive, and this is something that not a lot of people talk about relating to habits, is spend more time with people that are exhibiting the behavior that you want to emulate. Because there's this whole psychology factor that is studied about the fact that when we are in a group of other people, we are likely to emulate their behaviors because there's a lot of encouragement for doing so. People who are overweight, who start spending more time with people who are fit and healthy, tend to get more fit and healthy. These things occur. These kind of behavior oriented events like success or fitness happen in clusters. We say all the time that you're the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. And, as a way of saying, hey, you should spend your time around more positive and uplifting people. But there's a lot more to it than just an environment and being around people who are more uplifting. It's actually psychologically proven that it does happen. If you want to emulate a behavior and you hang around other people who are already exhibiting that behavior, you will start doing it more. And there's, of course, a whole bunch of reasons as to why that is. But part of it is the social pressure. Part of it is the social pressure because doing a particular behavior will get you approval of the people who are around you or disapproval. So if you spend a lot of time around, we'll use fitness as an example, people who are not fit and don't exercise regularly, and you spend a lot of time around those people, and you decide, hey, I'm going to start working out every day, they're not just going to not do it with you, they're going to actually discourage you. However, if you decide, I want to work out every day, so I'm going to start spending more time around people who are more fit, they are going to encourage you to do it. So it's not just a neutral or an advantage. They're the people who you might be spending time with who are exhibiting the behaviors you're trying to get rid of are actually holding you down. They're actually holding you back because they don't want you to change. They don't want you to be different. They don't want you to improve because they want you to stay with them. And they may have good intentions. They may have not good intentions. But one way or another, it happens. It doesn't matter why it happens. It's reality. It's the world. It happens. If you spend your time and you hang around people who are doing better and are more successful, you will become more successful because the pressure will be on to do it. I learned this in my own life. A little bit of a side story here. I learned this in my own life because when I originally kind of became successful as an offline entrepreneur, I was living back in Canada. And we started a business, my wife and I, and we were very successful with it. And it reached the point where we started to not feel like we fit in with the people in the town and the community where we were. We kind of felt that, it wasn't that people were saying bad things. It just didn't feel like these were necessarily really supporting what it was that we were doing. It was fine, as with most things with human society. It was totally fine while we were on the way up. But when you get successful, then people want to tear you back down. And so we didn't really feel like that was really kind of our vibe. So that's when we moved to Florida. We literally packed the kids in the car and we moved to Florida. We ran our business in Canada from Florida originally. So she would fly back and spend a week back in Canada running things at our two different locations. And then she would come home and we'd be home for a week or so. And then I'd fly back for a week. And we used to go back and forth. And we ran our business for several years before ultimately we decided to close things down in Canada and go full-time in Florida. But once we were in Florida, it was a totally different world because now we were hanging around people who were a lot more successful than we were. So even with our business success, these people were much more successful than we were. And it caused us to rise to their level. It caused us, we got exposed to more opportunities. We got exposed to more positive and different mindsets about success. And there was kind of a little bit of expectation that you were expected to live up to. Good or bad, we wanted to fit in. And therefore, we worked harder. We worked harder, we looked for more opportunities, and our success level rose to kind of match the level of the new friends that we had made in Florida. So don't diminish that hanging around people who exhibit the behavior you want to do more of, because that can drastically change things. So you want to be more fit, spend more time with your friends who are fit, and it will just happen because you will exhibit more of the behaviors they want or that they're exhibiting, and that will get you the result you want. So make it more attractive. Make the things that you want to do more attractive. Set rewards for yourself. If you do this for a certain period of time, there's going to be some reward. Try to tie those things to immediate rewards. If I drink my protein shake, I get to have my coffee. And hang around people who are going to give you positive social reward for doing the things that you want to do more of. The next thing that you can do to reinforce your habits is make it easy. And anyone who talks to me knows that I love what I'm about to talk about, which is reducing the friction associated with good behaviors. So when you can remove the barriers that come between you doing the things that you want to do, and you can create an environment where doing the right thing is as easy as possible, then what happens is habits get easy. So you always want to reduce the friction. And vice versa, as we'll talk about in a minute, you want to increase the friction associated with the bad behaviors that you want to do less of. You want to make it harder. Just like putting the fruit out on the counter reduces the friction to eat fruit, taking the food you don't want to eat and throwing them in the garbage can, so you got to go out and buy them if you want them, increases the friction on those things. So always try to make doing the right things easy. So for instance, if one of your goals that you want to do is get up every morning and then immediately get on the treadmill for half an hour, then before you go to bed at night, put out all your workout clothes by your bed so that when you get up, it's right there. You've done two things. One, you've made it obvious. So when you get up and you see it, it's like, oh yeah, right, I'm supposed to be working out. And you've made it easy because you've made it easier to make the transition to working out from getting out of bed because your clothes are there and they're all ready. So the more things you can do to reduce the friction in doing any task or any habit that you want to build is going to drastically increase the likelihood that you do it. And remember, if you want some task to become a habit, the key is to do it so many times that it becomes automatic. The repetition over time is what turns it into a habit. Another thing that you can do to make it easy is to use the 2-minute rule. And this was out of, um, um, I believe, Charles Duhigg's book, The Power of Habits. And so the 2-minute rule is essentially break any big habit that you want to do down so that starting it doesn't take more than 2 minutes. So I've spoken about this in the past. If you want to work out, don't start by saying, I'm going to go run 5K on the treadmill. Start out by saying, I'm going to put on my workout shoes. Do just 2 minutes of the beginning of the activity. I'm going to put on my workout shoes and I am going to walk to the office where the treadmill is. That's like something that I can do in 2 minutes. And if I do that, then I won that day, right? And then gradually do that and keep doing just the first 2 minutes of any activity that you want to do more of until it becomes a habit. Don't try to optimize it. Don't try to make it, now I'm running 10K on the treadmill, until it's already formed as a habit. So just keep doing the first 2 minutes. And then until it becomes ingrained and you're just doing it every day and it's automatic and you don't have to think about it and you don't have to force yourself to do it. And then increase it. And then say, well, I'm not just going to walk into the office with the treadmill. I'm not just going to put on my shoes. I'm going to put on my shoes and I'm going to walk to the office. Then once you're doing that, I'm not just going to put on my shoes and walk to the office. I'm going to get on the treadmill for 2 minutes. And then the 2 minutes will become 5, and the 5 minutes will become 10, and the 10 minutes will become 30, and then boom, you hit your goal. When you take a task and you make it the smallest piece that is necessary to get it done, you drastically increase the likelihood that you're going to do it. You have to take big things that are daunting, that you're going to want to avoid, and break them down into the smallest step, a 2-minute step. And don't increase it beyond 2 minutes until you're doing the 2 minutes every day. So that's another thing you can do to make it easy. But it's mostly about just creating that environment to make doing the right thing as easy as possible. Then the fourth thing that you can do to help build better habits is, for whatever habit you want to build, make it satisfying. As I said before, ultimately, our motivation of what we want to do and not do is completely run by what our brain thinks is going to be enjoyable and satisfying. So, what is your brain wants to do things that are going to generate that release of dopamine that gives you that feeling of happiness, that little bit of a high of happiness. So, what you want to do is you want to do things that are going to trigger that. So, because we're more likely to repeat a behavior when the experience is satisfying. And the other thing to remember about this is that the human brain is evolved to prioritize immediate reward over delayed reward. So this goes back to what we said previously, which is the reward from good habits is something that takes a long time to build. If you remember that curve from that graph, it's flat for a long time. You're going, you're doing this task, you're doing this task, you're going and you're working out every day and you're working out every day, and you're not really feeling that much different. You're not really feeling that much different. You haven't really lost that much weight. But if you keep doing it and you keep not missing a day, doing it every day, then eventually you hit that point where that curve starts to turn upwards. And when that curve starts to turn upwards sharply, that's when you really start to see the benefit. It's the exact same thing that people go through with their online businesses course that we talk so much, which is they don't consistently do the activities that are moving forward, so they never get to the point where that curve starts to turn up, because they're not compounding the effects. They're working in their business, but they're not doing it every day. So when they take a day off, they just lost the day that they did it. They've set themselves back. Nothing ever stays static. It's always either increasing or decreasing. When you're not working out, you're not even. You just went back a day. So if you work out on Monday and then you skip Tuesday, then it's like you never worked out on Monday. So if you don't do things consistently, you never get to the point where they start to compound. It's like if you put money in the bank for retirement, but then the next day you withdrew it back out. Are you ever going to have any money for retirement? Of course not. Are you ever going to experience compounding interest? Never. And it's the same thing with your habits and everything you do. So the problem is that you want to do these things that aren't going to pay off until a long ways down the future. Your brain wants to do things that are going to pay off right now, that are going to give dopamine right now. So what you want to do is you want to set up the systems, because remember, your habits are all just systems that you control. You want to set up the systems to give yourself an immediate reward. Again, a good example of that was the one that I gave earlier about the coffee and the protein shake. I know I keep focusing on that, but I really like my coffee. So what can I say? So I get an immediate reward for drinking my protein shake, because that means I get to have my coffee. I can't have my coffee until I have the protein shake. So I set it up so there's an immediate reward. Now, obviously, it's better the closer it is to the activity. So the closer that you do the thing you are trying to develop into a habit, and then it being immediately followed by reward, that's good. But you can also set up ones that are short term but not immediate. So you can say, if I do this work in my business every day this week, then this weekend I'm going to do something that I want to do. So I do that with my diet, for instance. So I follow this diet where 6 days a week I have to follow the rules, and 1 day a week I get to splurge and do whatever I want. So I always know, if I follow the rules for 6 days straight, then the 7th day I get to eat whatever I want. Yeah, and there's, we're not here talking about diet, but there's logic and reasons as to why that actually works. So I can go through those 6 days because I know there's going to be a reward at the end. If I skip a day, if I miss it a day, then I have to wait 6 more days before I get to have my reward again. So I don't want to miss any days, because I want to get to the reward where I can have cake and chips and chocolate and whatever I feel like eating, right? So set up your rules so that you've got rewards in the short term for doing the things that are going to pay off in the long term. So set up those immediate rewards. And the other thing you can do, which I kind of alluded to in what I just said, is try to set up a chain, or what they call a habit tracker. So Jerry Seinfeld's very famous for doing this, where he had a calendar, and he wanted to make sure that he wrote a new joke every day. So every day he would write a joke, he'd make a big red X on the calendar for, okay, I wrote a joke today. The more you do that, the more you start developing a win streak, the less likely you're going to want to break that and go back. I've done that in the past when I wanted to do things like do Facebook Lives more frequently. I would set it up and I would make a note of how many days in a row I had done a Facebook Live. And so I never wanted to miss a day. I would never want to miss a day and skip a day, because I would break my streak. Everybody wants to be on a win streak. So set up these streaks and track them. So if you want to make sure that you send an email to your mailing list every day, then start marking it on a calendar. Start having something right in front of you that you've made obvious, where you're tracking how many days in a row you have emailed your list. And then, of course, set up rewards. If you email your list 5 days, you get a reward. If you email your list for another 5 days, you get a reward. And so then you have something to work for, and you also have this thing that you do not want to break the chain. Now, it's still going to happen. There's things are going to come up, and the chain will eventually be broken. No winning streak of any sports team ever lasts forever. There's always at some point where they have an off day and they're playing against a hard opponent and they lose, no matter how good they are, right? And it's going to be the same with you. So you're going to have days where that streak is going to get broken. So then the next rule comes into place. Don't miss twice. So if there's something you're trying to do consistently that you would like to develop into a habit, if you do miss it a day, then resolve that you will never miss 2 days in a row. So if you miss it today because something came up, then tomorrow you absolutely have to do it. It's life and death critical that you get back tomorrow. Because this, again, is what happens with people in their online businesses. They're working and they're, let's say, generating traffic, and they're sending it, and they're sending the traffic to their opportunities or the capture pages, and they're going and going, and then something comes up and they miss a day. But do they come back the next day? No, they probably miss another day, and then they miss another day, and then they miss another day. And part of that is because it's the opposite of the calendar. Once you've broken the chain, well, does it really matter? This is what goes through your mind. I missed yesterday. Does it really matter if I also missed today? It's the reverse effect to the chain. Is once the chain's broken, then you become in a chain of losing, right? Now it's how many days in a row are you going to go without doing the habit before you start it back up again? There's no reason to, because there's no chain left that you're trying not to break. So just set that rule and say you don't miss twice. So if you have a really bad day today and you don't get email out to your list, or you don't promote your lead capture page, then resolve that you're absolutely not going to miss twice. You'll be back at it and you'll be doing it tomorrow. And of course, tomorrow is then the start of a new chain that you will not want to break. And the longer that chain gets, the more motivation is to not break it. I know somebody who has worked out following his particular routine. He has worked out every single day for the last 3.5 years, never missed a day of a workout. Now, so that is a great chain. Sounds great. He's 78 years old. 78 years old, and he has not missed a day where he did not work out for a minimum of 1 hour in over 3 years. That is a chain he does not want to break, right? But if he did, then it would be important to follow that rule. Don't miss twice, okay? So by doing this, what you're doing is you're creating these rewards, and you're creating this satisfying effect of what you do. It's very satisfying to mark that X on the calendar and realize you just worked out for the 980th day. That gives you a satisfying, immediate reward for this activity that you did that does not pay off immediately, right? So just keeping the chain going helps to make it satisfying. So how do we reverse this? Well, you can reverse it by thinking about the 4 steps to eliminate bad habits. So how do you take those same rules and make it easier to stop the things that you don't want to do? And of course, the way you do it is to do the opposite, or the inverse of the 4 steps to build the habits. So the first one was make it obvious if you wanted to build something. The next part, if you want to get rid of a bad habit, is to do the opposite, make it invisible. The reality is we look at people and we think, oh, gee, that person has tons of self-control. I wish I had self-control like that person. They don't eat junk food. They don't do this. They don't do that. Self-control is very overrated. Usually, people with high self-control tend to just spend a lot less time in tempting situations. It's far easier to avoid temptation than it is to resist it. And so, one of the most practical ways to eliminate a bad habit is to reduce your exposure to whatever cue it is causes the habit to fire. Because we don't really think about these habits, they're unconscious in many ways. Something happens, and that causes us to then react in a way which is a habit. You see that muffin on the counter, and your habit is, I'm going to eat it, right? You immediately start to think about all of the reward, all of the satisfying reward you're going to have right now if you eat that muffin. And that triggers your response to actually eat the muffin. They talk about a lot more about this in the studies and et cetera on habits, about this cycle of these 4 ways. But essentially, a lot of things are cued by what you see. If I go over to the refrigerator and I open up the fridge and inside the fridge is ice cream, then that's going to cue me to want to eat the ice cream. If I go over to the cupboard and I open up the cupboard and there are my favorite chocolate bars, I'm going to want to eat those chocolate bars. And I'm going to have to exhibit self-control and discipline to prevent myself from just eating all of those chocolate bars right this instant. However, what if the chocolate bars weren't there? What if I didn't have any chocolate bars in the house? What if there was no ice cream in the freezer? What if all the things that I'm trying to avoid were invisible? How can you make those things invisible? And this applies to a lot of things. I have a really bad habit, and I have it right here in my hand, of my cell phone, and I've talked about this in the past. This thing is a distraction machine. This thing will distract me from doing anything that I want to do if I let it. The solution to not being distracted by this phone is that when I'm trying to do something that I want to not be distracted, I put the phone in the other room. I make the phone invisible. What I want to do is have the phone sitting as it is right now. I didn't need to stop my distraction, so it's here, right on my desk, where I'm going to put it back right now, right under my computer monitor, where every time that thing lights up and bings and blings, it makes me want to grab it, and I have to use my self-control to force myself to leave it alone, because I need to stay concentrated on these emails I'm writing right now, or this presentation I'm writing for the webinar tonight, right? I need to stay focused on this, but this thing is a constant distraction. I make it invisible, get it out of the room. Same thing. A lot of people have problems putting their phones down at night. Constant entertainment machines. They have problems either putting their phone down at night, or they wake up in the middle of the night and they grab their phone, and then they discover they've been up for an hour in the middle of the night rather than just going back to sleep because their phone was right there. Put it in the other room. Don't keep your phone at your bedside at night if you find your phone to be distracting you from getting proper sleep. Get rid of it. Make it invisible. So think about all the things that you want to get rid of or do less of, and try to make them as invisible as possible. And that will go a long way, because self-control is overrated. The second thing you can do is the opposite. Our first rule was that we wanted to make it obvious for the things that we wanted to do. If we don't want to do them, we want to make them invisible. Back in the original rules, we also wanted to make it rewarding. Well, how about if instead of making something rewarding that we want to do more, if we have a bad habit we want to eliminate, let's make it unattractive. So let's set things up in such a way that doing this thing that you don't want to do actually isn't rewarding. It's the opposite. It's actually bad, right? So there's a lot of different ways you can do this. But so it's kind of individualized depending on what you want to do. But what you have to remember is that a lot of the attractiveness of things is in our head. So, and we have control over things in our head. So if you spend some time thinking about all the bad things that go along with whatever this is that you want to eliminate out of your life, then it will be less attractive. We have had campaigns for probably 30 years now trying to convince people not to smoke by showing how unattractive smoking is. We used to have the old ones where it showed the black lungs of a smoker and be like, gee, I don't want black lungs, right? You're making it, they were trying to make it unattractive. They were doing this exact thing, trying to break a habit by making it unattractive. Now they have these campaigns where it shows people who have had their health seriously impacted by being smokers. So they, had to have breathing tubes, put in, or they lost all their teeth, or this kind of thing. They're saying, hey, this thing that you think is great, smoking, actually isn't. It's really unattractive, and it's going to make you unattractive, right? So how can you make things unattractive? And I have an example of this that was not deliberate, but it certainly had that effect. And I don't talk about this very much because I don't really have I don't like to impose anything or have anybody think that I impose what my thoughts are on anybody else, because I think everybody should do whatever they want to do. But I haven't eaten meat in about 10 years. So, with a few exceptions, I'm not like a vegan. I don't eat just plant-based things. I do eat eggs and I do eat dairy. I gotta have my coffee cream and my coffee after all. And I do eat some shellfish, but I don't eat regular fin fish, and I don't eat chicken, and I don't eat pork, and I don't eat beef, and I haven't in probably 10 years. And one of the things that makes that not very hard to do for me is, and I used to eat it a lot, right? I used to eat it every meal, and I love my steak and I love my ribs and all of that kind of thing. But I don't really have to fight it anymore with any willpower because I did things that made meat unattractive to me. So, and again, I'm not suggesting that anyone should give up meat. It was a choice that I made and that my wife made and that we're happy with. But I did research and I came up with all the reasons why I shouldn't be eating meat. So, there's obviously health reasons. There are big environmental reasons. If you believe in saving the environment, that you shouldn't eat meat. But you know what the biggest defining thing was? I was on a trip about 8 years ago, shortly after we gave up eating meat, I would say. And it was in California, and we were driving up a highway through the Central Valley of California, I think from LA to San Francisco. And on the side of the highway was a feedlot, a cattle feedlot. And it was horrible conditions. The entire feedlot was just mud. And it was probably 50 or 75 acres. Like it was big. It was just mud and cows. And you could smell it. Like you could smell the manure 5 miles away. And driving by that and just kind of looking at it as we drove by it on the highway was like, wow, I do not want to be contributing to that. So the idea of eating meat became all of these things are the things that I associate with eating meat, is the vision and the smell of that feedlot and the condition that those animals were kept in. So you can make you not want to do the things that you're trying to eliminate, your bad habits, by just associating all kinds of negative things to them and making them unattractive. And then, of course, again, one of the tenets of trying to build good habits is make it easy. So the opposite of that, to get rid of a bad habit, is to make it difficult. Increase the friction in order to do this activity. So one way to do that is what I mentioned previously, which is get the stuff out of the house. Right now, I in case you haven't noticed from the number of times I've used this as a reference, I really love chocolate bars. I especially love Canadian chocolate bars, and I'm in Canada right now. Like, there's just a very different selection of chocolate here compared to in the US. So there's nothing I would like to do more right now, than go get a couple of my favorite Canadian chocolate bars and eat them. But I'm trying to take care of my health, so I'm trying to not eat chocolate bars. So how do I make that difficult? There's no chocolate bars in the house. Because if there was a chocolate bar here, I would have to eat it right after this call. So I've increased the friction. What is the likelihood that I am going to go out and either drive or walk to a store and get a chocolate bar? I don't like chocolate bars that much. I'm not going to go out, especially now since it's actually a snowstorm outside, believe it or not. I am not going to go out and get myself a chocolate bar right now, because I like it, but I don't like it that much. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't some days when I actually do go out and get a chocolate bar, but it allows me to stop that activity because I've made it difficult. I've made it difficult to do it. So something you don't want to do everything you can to try to make it harder to actually do it. Because you'll just reach the point, like I do with the chocolate bars, where just isn't worth it. As much as I like chocolate bars, I like not having to walk out in a snowstorm more. So make things difficult, increase the friction. The other thing that you can do to make things more difficult, and we talked about this with procrastination last week, is to use a commitment device. One thing to think about with this is like set up a rule or use different devices to make it difficult, to make it more harder. So if you're spending too much time on social media and you want to cut that down, you don't want to spend more than a half an hour a day on social media, well, there are apps you can install on your phone and on your computer that will limit the time you can spend on Facebook. After the 30 minutes, they block Facebook and you won't be able to see it again until tomorrow. So you can use tools like that to make binging on Facebook more difficult. You can, of course, get those kind of apps and devices and programs for your computers to control anything that you don't want to do. If somebody has a gambling problem, how about putting yourself on the list of banned gamblers for your state, so that it's actually illegal for you to walk into a casino and you could be arrested. If somebody has a gambling problem, doing that is going to make that bad habit a lot more difficult, right? The other thing you can do is, as kind of a reverse thing, is things like a gym membership. You're much more likely to go and work out if you have a gym membership than if you just have the equipment in your house. Because if you're paying for a gym membership, then you want to get your money's worth out of it. You're making it more difficult to skip going to the gym because you're thinking, I really need to go to the gym, right? And the other thing you can do, which kind of ties in with unattractive, difficult, and is to make it unsatisfying. So remember, we said increase the satisfaction if you wanted to build a good habit. Well, as an opposite, make it unsatisfying. Make it so that doing those things that are your bad habits actually have negative consequences. So one way to do it is to use accountability partners. So go and tell other people that you're going to break this bad habit that you have, and you will be much less likely to exhibit that habit because you won't want to be judged by those people. If you tell your spouse and your children and your family, I'm giving up smoking, then that is going to be a powerful motivator for the fact that you do not want to go back to those people and say, I'm smoking again. You've said by making it public, you've turned them into accountability partners. They're going to help keep you on the straight and narrow. The other way to do it, if we go to the workout example again, is having a workout buddy. If you have a workout buddy that comes and picks you up and you guys go work out at the gym 3 days a week, well, you're never going to want to tell your buddy, don't come today, I don't feel like going to the gym. So you're going to be much more likely to do it because that workout buddy is your accountability partner. And the other thing you can do, which again we talked about in relation to procrastination last week, is habit contracts. So set up a contract with yourself where you say, I am going to do this. And if I skip it, so if I miss a day, I'm going to do this every day. And if I miss a day, I have to do something I really don't want to do. So if let's say you are a lifelong Republican and you voted Republican in every single election since you turned 18. Well, if you miss your workout, you got to donate $10 to the Democratic Party. You're going to be much less likely to miss your workouts if that is the consequence that you have set up in your habit contract for breaking this habit. So you can force yourself to do things by making them less satisfying. The reward of eating that chocolate bar to me is a lot less satisfying when I think that I have to go out in a snowstorm to go get it. It's so decrease the satisfaction by making bad consequences to doing those bad things. And if you do these things, if you follow the 4 ways to build good habits, and then the inverse, the 4 things that you want to do in order to decrease your bad habits, then you'll have much more control over how you're spending your time. So just as a reminder, if you want to build better habits, make them obvious, make them attractive, make them easy, and make them satisfying. Think about all the ways that you can increase those 4 things for the things you want to do more of. And the things you want to do less of, make them invisible, make them unattractive, make them difficult, and make them unsatisfying. And if you do that, you will have much more control. The reality is that habit formation is a process where a behavior becomes progressively more automatic by repeating it. The more you repeat it, the more likely you will keep doing it. All of those things that we listed that can break bad habits or build good ones are all on the basis of getting you to repeat it more and build it into a habit. The amount of time you've been performing the habit is not nearly as important as the number of times you've performed it. That's why the 2-minute rule works. Because even though you are only spending 2 minutes on that habit and you're not running 10K on the treadmill, it's more likely to build into a habit of running every day because you never miss a day, because you've made it easier to accomplish by making the goal smaller. So this is the key to habits, and habits are the key to compounding the time that you're spending and improving your life. So I hope you enjoyed that tonight. As usual, I am totally open to any questions that anyone might have. You can make them related to habits or to anything we've discussed in the past or to pretty much anything. Kind of a ask me anything kind of moment. I'd like to ask somebody why I'm getting 6 to 8 inches of snow tonight. The winter was over, but I don't have anybody to ask that that's going to give me an answer. But I'm looking out my window right now, and Norman says, your coaching will become a habit for me. Well, I kind of broke my own rule of trying to make sure that everything was at a defined time and place when I delayed this call by half an hour. So it was kind of weird that I was actually breaking that. But the more days you show up here for this, the more likely it's going to become a habit that this is how you spend your Monday night. It's sad that this is how you want to spend your Monday night, but again, sometimes you have to do the things that are not satisfying because it's going to pay off in the long term. And learning is certainly one of those things. You may not enjoy learning in the moment that you're learning, but it is something that will compound over time and have a dramatic effect in the future. So I just need to find a way to get a good pair here, where if you come to the seminar and you put up with me, then you'll get some sort of immediate reward right afterwards. I need to send all of you guys chocolate bars, I think, if chocolate's your thing. That would be another question I would have, which is, why are all my Canadian chocolate bars not available when I'm in the United States? I mean, and it's not that they're completely unavailable, just on an off note. I'll definitely want to cut this out of the replay. But I can sometimes find them in the international section of the grocery store. But everybody who's on this call that's from the United States is so missing out. When I go to the Walmart or the store and I see the very sparse selection of chocolate bars that is available in the United States compared to what we have here in Canada. We have a lot of things here in Canada which are really, I think, based out of the UK. And, like, I love my Coffee Crisp bar, or my Wonder Bar, or my Mr. Big, or Arrow, or and none of those things are available in the United States. I don't know how you guys live down there. Sometimes I just take a bag of them with me when I go, and I do the same thing for my son when I go visit him, because he lives in Chicago, but he did high school here in Canada, so he developed a taste for all of the Canadian chocolate bars that you can't buy in the United States too. So no questions. I'm going to have to keep rambling about chocolate for a while longer. Just on an off note, the other thing that is very interesting about chocolate is that, we're getting close to Easter. And of course, everybody has their chocolate Easter bunnies. Well, that's another really big difference between Canada and the United States, is the selection of what you can get made out of chocolate in the United States is very low compared to what you can get here in Canada. We have a lot of chocolate companies based out of Quebec, which make virtually every character you could ever imagine in hollow chocolate. So any Disney character you could ever want, you can get in chocolate. Any cartoon character you could ever want, you can get in chocolate. You can get chocolate fire trucks. You can get chocolate teddy bears. You name it. It's not just bunnies up here. It's like amazing the amount of things that they make out of chocolate up here. The Easter section at Walmart is like a third of the store. There's so much selection of things at some of these stores of different things. So when I get down to the US and I'm there for Easter and I look at the small little selection of chocolate things that are available, I'm like, you guys are so missing out on all of the things that you could get in chocolate. We have every character from Nickelodeon in chocolate up here, every character from Disney in chocolate. I mean, it's a kid's dream, especially if you were a kid like me, who obviously liked a lot of chocolate. All right, okay, so nobody has any questions about habits. So no, I'm not going to get a chocolate bar right now. It is snowstorm, and despite the fact that all I've talked about is chocolate for the last hour and a half, I am not going to have chocolate. I'm going to go out to the kitchen and maybe have a coffee, since that was the other thing that I talked about. So I hope everybody enjoyed the show tonight. I hope the sound quality was better tonight than It has been in the past, and and I will. I hope that you put these things to use. And like I said, if you want to know more about these things, then the two books, "The Power of Habit" by Charles Duhigg, and "The Atomic Habits" by James Clear, which just came out this year. Atomic Habits by James Clear. I've already read it 3 times. Then I are both highly recommended. It's just picking up these little things, and that, of course, is often what we talk about on Monday nights, are the little differences, the little tools, the little tricks you can do to just make yourself a little bit better each day. And when you see the effect of what a 1% improvement each day can have, and there's some fantastic stories. I could go on for quite a bit longer about the 1% improvement thing. There's a fantastic story in James Clear's book about the British cycling team. And it's amazing the difference that they were able to make by being focused on just small marginal improvements and the compounding effect of them. They went from a team which had only won 1 Olympic medal since 1908 to winning 60% of the Olympic medals in just a period of a couple of years of focusing on 1% improvements. So, yeah, there's a lot of power there, and that power is there for all of us to use and exploit as well. So, let's go focus on getting better, people. And we'll see you all back here on Wednesday.